Apparently, the reporter had put the wrong location for tonight, even though a lot of people did know about it. So we might have people trickling in for a little while. I think this is not working very well.
Never has.
Only that speaker is working, this one isn't working back here.
All right. Well, I hope you can hear anyway, and I'll try to project if this thing starts failing.
How about if I move the speaker closer?
If you like, that's
This is
fine.
good.
Okay, so let's get started. We have two forums tonight, and in the interest of time, we'd like to get going. So, pardon me. Okay, so this is the second evening of the three. This is not working. I'm just going to project, if you don't mind. If you really can't hear me, tell me. Okay. Okay. Hopefully this works. Yeah? All right, so this is the second evening. We have 3 evenings of forums this year. We have 6 seats that are being contested, 5 city council seats, and 1 school board seat. Our first forum was last Thursday. We have this session tonight and 1 more on Wednesday. And I think now, are we plugged in now? No.
Doesn't matter, just tell us what you
Keep
know.
talking. It should work
Okay,
better.
all right. My name is Orna Samueli. I helped put these sessions together because I'd like to make a more informed decision myself during the election. And I know many of you would as well. There's a lot at stake, and I know we're all very interested in learning from the candidates about their views on many important issues. I'd like to thank the candidates for taking time to come out and meet with us. I appreciate the opportunity to understand these issues that affect our lives and everybody here on Mercer Island. In the first forum tonight, I'd like to welcome Patrick Allcorn and Lisa Anderl. I'd also like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Kate Rosenbaum. No relation to the candidate Dave Rosenbaum. Vandenbosch, who will be our timekeeper for the evening. Before we begin, I'd just like to spend just a few minutes on the ground rules. There are 3 points I want to make. First of all, the evening is intended to be informative for the audience and fair for the candidates. The candidates have all agreed to the rules prior to tonight's agenda. Based on a coin toss, Patrick will start the opening comments in this first round of forums. Also, please hold your applause until the end. There's going to be a lot of enthusiasm over the course of some of the questions and comments, but we ask that you just contain that, and then at the end give both candidates a rousing applause. And finally, there are some here that are filming. Ira is here filming on our behalf and on behalf of the community. I will figure out how to post that on Nextdoor so that so that this evening and the prior evening will be available to those who are not able to be here tonight. Okay, if you can help me with that. I don't have an account anymore. So one last thing, please, this is a forum that we're putting on. We're citizens here just like you. Cut us a little slack, give us a little grace if some things don't go absolutely perfectly in terms of timing or equipment or anything else. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. I'm Kate Rosenbaum, and I'm going to be the moderator tonight. I just want to go over some of the rules and the format for tonight. As Orna said, hold your applause until the end. We're going to start off with introductory comments from each candidate, and then they'll each have a short response time, and then we'll start with the questions. So if you come up, we'll ask you to form a line right here, so that I don't have to go too far away to give you the microphone. And you'll be able to ask your question of the candidates, and then the candidates will each answer your question in turn, alternating who goes first, and they'll each have 1.5 minutes to respond. While they're answering your question, you can stay here, but please don't ask any follow-up questions. If you want to have a follow-up question, go back and get to the end of the line and ask again, so we can give everyone a chance to ask questions. When you come up to ask a question, state your name, maybe a little bit about yourself, very briefly, like I'm a resident, or I'm a parent, or I'm a business owner. but don't give us too much backstory. We want to get to the question because we want to hear from the candidates. So, so if I cut you off, I'm sorry. And well, the other thing I would ask is if you have a cell phone, please put it on Do Not Disturb so we don't have any little things and tweets and whistles going on. That would be very helpful. And then, let's see if there's anything else. I think that might be all I need to tell you. There are tables in the lobby for material, but we've asked the candidates not to have any campaign materials on display here in the hall. And we would also ask that you, if you want to, cheer and rah-rah for your person that you're supporting, wait until the end so we can do it all together. All right? So we're going to start. We've done a coin toss to determine who's going to go first. And so Patrick is going to start off our evening with his opening statement. He's got 3 minutes.
Hello, and thank you all so much for coming tonight and for taking an active role in our democracy by spending some time here. My name is Patrick Allcorn, and I'm running for position 4 on the Mercer Island City Council. I've knocked on about 1,000 doors throughout the course of this campaign so that voters have an opportunity to ask me whatever question they might have about my position on issues. And the number one question by far has been, why would anyone in their right mind want to do that job? It's a fair question. The amount of abuse that candidates sometimes take online or in person is pretty abhorrent, so it's a lot to handle. And our city no longer has the revenue to maintain the level of services that we've grown accustomed to, and budget projections are bleak. And we need a council full of creative problem solvers with open minds. And I have experience running a small business where we often had to make the most out of the little bit we had, and it was creative problem solving that helped that business and all of the businesses that we partnered with truly thrive. And I hope to do that same thing for Mercer Island and our retail businesses here. We also need a council who understands that we're part of a greater region. We should embrace that simple fact and act as a regional partner as opposed to a regional roadblock. And we can do this without jeopardizing the public safety that we all have grown so accustomed to. And we need a council that will center our environment in its decision making. I was inspired to see the Mercer Island students walk out of class recently to demand action on climate change, and I heard their call. And I'll make sure that environmental impact is considered with every decision that comes before the council, and I will actively pursue opportunities to make the city greener in its operations. I've been endorsed by State Senator Lisa Wellman, State Representatives Tana Sen and Mi-Lin Tai, organizations such as Planned Parenthood Votes Northwest in Hawaii, the Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility, Equal Rights Washington, and Washington Bikes. And I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion and to earning your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have from Lisa. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Anderl, and I am running for council position number 4. It is a position that I currently hold, having been appointed in December of 2018, selected by the majority of the council from among 12 candidates to fill a vacant seat. It has been my pleasure and honor to serve on council. It is a lot of work, but it is so gratifying to be learning about the issues and serving the community. My background is I've lived on the island for 20 years. We're in our 3rd house. We kind of hovered on the north end, which makes for easy access on and off the island. We love it there. Our dog loves Lid Park. We're there almost every day. I have a pretty easy commute into Seattle, so I think that we are really blessed to live in this little oasis, this little paradise here, and I would like to keep it as good as it has been for the last 20 years, at least since I've been here. We've actually had friends on the island since 1964, so we know the history. I've walked Pioneer Park since I was a kid, literally, so I think preserving the parks, balancing the budget, having a fiscally sustainable plan are super important. They've been my priorities. I was on the CAG, the Community Advisory Group that advised the city. I was part of the minority that said, no, you don't need to raise taxes. I was no on Prop 1, which distinguishes me in a very distinct measure from my opponent. I disagree that we have a budget crisis. I think that the city has enough revenues to be sustainable for a long time, and we just need to exercise some fiscal restraint and controls on spending that does not necessarily need to mean that we're going to cut services. Me personally, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for 35 years. I worked for CenturyLink. I have worked as a judge pro tem in the past. I have worked for the state of Washington as an administrative law judge. And I have had intense negotiations with large entities, including Sound Transit. I feel like those skills, the negotiation skills, the strategic planning skills, the tactical skills that I have gained over the years that I have worked in this field stand me in good stead. Interestingly, at least for me, I also owned a small business during this time. I owned Morphy's Cake Shop in downtown Seattle for 7 years, and so I also understand the challenges of balancing a tight budget and doing 7 people's work with 2.5 people. As I said, I've been pleased to serve on the council. I would be proud and honored to continue to do so, so I will ask for your vote. If you brought your ballots, I can only help you. Thank you very much.
Now, Patrick, you'll have 1 minute for response.
I think Lisa has done an admirable job on the council, and I thank her for the time that she has served. I think that we have very different priorities when it comes to the direction that Mercer Island needs to take. It's great that she's lived here for 20 years and has friends who've lived here for 50, but we need to be looking forward. The region around us is growing and expanding, and we're not going to be immune to that. We can't pretend that we are not going to feel that effect and try to keep everything the way it was 50 years ago. That's just not a realistic way of doing business, and it's not something that's going to lead to strong regional partnerships. I definitely believe in preserving the parks. I think that we're blessed to have 475 acres of beautiful park space. I'm there pretty much every weekend with my kids. But we need to be preserving the services as well. And part of what made me decide to run for this position in particular were some of the services that Lisa voted against funding. So I'm looking to maintain those services, to do what we can with the budget deficit that we are facing. And I'm being told to stop now. With a please even, so I'm going to do that.
Thank you. Lisa.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I do believe more strongly, I think, than my opponent in local control. I think that if local council people are not looking out for local interests, nobody else will be. There are a lot of people who can concentrate on regional issues. There are a lot of people who can concentrate on state issues. There are a lot of people who can concentrate on national issues. I'm not saying those issues don't inform us. We are part of a global community. But your local city council person needs to prioritize local city issues first and make sure that our interests are protected. And that sometimes means pushing back against regional partnerships that may be better for everybody else than us. With regard to the parks, I think we do have very different positions on this. Concerned Citizens for Mercer Island Parks did a survey. All of the candidates responded out on the tables. In the front, you will see the answers for myself and Mr. Allcorn printed out in their entirety straight from the webpage. We do not agree on really anything with regard to parks. I think they should be preserved.
Thanks, Lisa. So now we're going to go on to the question section. We'll see how long my microphone works. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask of the candidates, we ask you to form a line over here, and we'll just go down the line. So again, I'm going to reiterate, please state your name, speak loudly, give us a little context, ask your question, and then wait until each candidate has had a chance to answer. And if you would like to ask a second question, you can go stand at the back of the line and start again.
Okay. Thank you. Let me just say thank you for being here and trying to make the city a better place. My name's Eric Ratman. I've been here for 20 years. I'm going to ask the question I've asked previous councilors. There are 2 events in my mind that could devastate this community. One is an earthquake, the other is fire. And I'm concerned about fires, major fires here on Mercer Island. Specifically, every July 4th, we allow people to play with fire. My concern is those fires get up in the canopies of the trees, and the fire department won't be able to handle it, especially if we have some wind. My question is, we're the only city in the area that allows fireworks. Renton, Seattle, Issaquah, Bellevue, Sammamish do not allow popping of fireworks or exploding fireworks. Would you consider banning fireworks if you were elected to Mercer Island City Council?
So to answer this question, first, we're going to hear from Patrick. You have a minute and a half.
Thank you for that question. And yes, I absolutely would consider. I think it's ironic that we are the one city in the region that allows fireworks, given the geography of our landscape and how difficult it could be for a fire truck to get to a fire if it happens, way down on East Mercer Way. Those are precious seconds that could be lost, and that 475 acres of beautiful parkland could be destroyed as well. I mean, as far worse would be people's homes and maybe even lives. So I see no greater good to fireworks. There's nothing there that you can't get the same enjoyment from an organized. I wouldn't want to ban something like if Summer Celebration came back and we had an organized professional doing the fireworks, then I think that's one story. But I don't really see the need for individuals to be playing with fireworks.
Lisa, you have a minute and a half.
Okay, thank you. We expected this question, I think, because we knew that it had been asked in other forums. And I am not as set on banning fireworks as Mr. Allcorn would be. I think this is an area where we need to talk to the community and find out what does the community at large want. The sale of legal fireworks, let's emphasize this, legal fireworks on the island is extraordinarily popular with a number of residents. Banning all fireworks simply on an island like this with a lot of docks and a lot of waterfront and a lot of opportunity to set them off turns otherwise law-abiding citizens into lawbreakers. So I think we need to be very clear that any illegal fireworks are prohibited on the island and need to be appropriately addressed. If the community at large wants to ban fireworks, then the council should consider it. I personally feel like it is a wonderful expression of our democracy. It is a celebration of the independence and the creation of our country, and I hope that people mark it in a very safe and moderate way, which has been my experience here over the last 24th of July. Thank you.
Okay, I'll hold this one.
Hi, my name's Sidley Smith, and my family and I moved to the island in 2010. And I would be interested in hearing from the candidates on the funding and maintenance and refurbishment of shared assets between the school district and the city, such as the Mary Wade Pool, parks, and any kind of shared use facilities.
Thank you. Lisa, you have a minute and a half.
Great, thank you. Yes, not ever having had the privilege of having any kids in the schools here, I'm not as familiar with the shared facilities, although I do know that the city pays the school district a bit of money every year to maintain the pool. I know that the city provides a significant benefit in terms of maintenance of athletic fields. I know that schools and all of the accoutrements of schools are very expensive to run. And I think the city has a very good collaborative relationship with the school district. We have quarterly joint meetings. I think that we need to look at how we can run things efficiently, support the bonds that are necessary to support capital and operational needs of the schools. And, I think that's it.
That's another great question, thank you. I think that the money that goes to the school district is best spent educating our children, and when we have shared facilities that are used during school hours, but used also on weekends, used in the evenings by non-school entities, I think that the city is getting a benefit from that, and that the city should carry some of the responsibility of maintaining and enhancing those fields. So. Yeah, I think that it's great. The city has a great relationship with the school board, and those quarterly meetings are really wonderful, and that strong collaboration is definitely needed. The city is in financial trouble right now, so maybe it's a time where we look at doing a school levy that's focused more on the structures rather than anything else.
Hi, I'm Marguerite Smith. I'm a long-time resident and an enthusiastic park user with a dog. And I am curious as to what your respective positions are with regard to parks, and also if you have any particular position with regard to dogs.
Patrick?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I'm also an enthusiastic park user. I'm at one of the parks at least once a weekend with my kids. They prefer Dragon Park. I like Luther Burbank because there's a little more diversity there. I don't think I'm as far over as Lisa as far as putting all of the parks into a trust. I think that it's great that happened with Pioneer Park, and that is a treasure right in the heart of the island, and one that my wife runs in every single morning. So we love Pioneer Park. Do wish dogs would be on leash more at some of the parks. My 3-year-old son right now is terrified of dogs because at the train park at Mercerdale, he's had a few instances where dogs just jump on him, and they're twice his size, so they knock him over, and now he has a strict fear of dogs, which is unfortunate. So I love dogs. I think that it's great that we have off-leash areas. I'd like to find more of those off-leash areas because it's important. But fan of the parks and fan of dogs.
Thank you. At the end of the forum, I will show you pictures of my chocolate lab on my phone. Yeah, we have had 2 dogs since we've lived on the island. Both are chocolate labs. Literally walk Lid Park virtually every day that I can. We this morning just inaugurated the first time I put the blinky red light on his collar so I could see him. But I think the parks should be protected, and I don't think parks should be prioritized. I don't think you can just say, oh, that little scrappy area by Tully's isn't important. It is. It's part of the park, and it's part of the green space in our city. It's kind of the heart and the soul and the lungs of our city. It gives people a place to breathe and to think and to just have a respite from the pressures of life. So I would protect all the parks in a way that's the most financially efficient to do so. If putting them in a trust creates trustees and costs extra money, well then let's do something legislatively to protect them so that they're not constantly pawns in these bargaining chips of, oh, are we going to build an art center in the middle of our park? I would adamantly and vehemently oppose that. I do think dog owners need to be responsible. They need to pick up after their dogs. When appropriate, they need to be on leash. I think it's great that we have a community that does support off-leash areas, and I would work to continue to have that that bonus that we have here in this city.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Branham. I've lived on the island since 1977. On Nextdoor, we've seen a lot of talk about homelessness and fear of creeping tent cities and all that. I'd like to know how you feel about our art contribution.
Our art contribution? Arch contribution. Okay. Lisa, you get to start.
Okay, great. Yeah, ARCH is a regional coalition for housing. They are a regional nonprofit that is supposed to provide low-cost housing, below-cost housing for purchase and for rent. Mercer Island contributes both to their operating budget, which is as part of an interlocal agreement, a mandatory amount, I think it's $33,000 a year, and in return for that, we get planning assistance that we would otherwise have to pay a city employee to do with regard to low-cost housing. So that component of it may be a wise thing to continue. The city council has voted previously and over my opposition to increase our voluntary contribution to ARCH by $50,000 per year. And based on the news reports that we had seen that were not disputed by ARCH, that a number of the purchase units were being used improperly, that ARCH did not have sufficient internal controls to audit them, that people who had incomes way above the threshold were buying these units and basically using them as investment properties with our tax dollars and then selling them at profits or making money off of rents, thereby, really defrauding the system and depriving people who would otherwise legitimately be entitled to this housing of an opportunity to have that housing. I think we need to look at dialing back our voluntary contribution until they have sufficient controls in place.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Homelessness, clearly, it's a top priority for our entire region right now, and with our proximity to Seattle, there's no way that we're going to be immune from it. So I know that Arch has not been the most well-run organization, and that there has been some fraud there, but part of that comes from their amazing success that they've had, and how much it's been needed and how much it's been used. They've just grown faster than they're able to administratively keep up with it. So it's great to hear that Lisa supports our contribution, though she voted against our contribution towards their administrative services, which is needed in order to do that oversight that is so very needed in their organization. So I support that funding. I don't think that, if we're not doing something to tackle the problem, then that's when we see the problem come right to our front door. So how can we be surprised if we're not going to take part in finding the solution? We're going to be straddled with the problem. So we need to do more, I think. I think it'd be great to look at ways to do more outside of our funding to Arch to help the region with this massive problem, because it is a true emergency at this point that we need to address.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Harper. I've lived on the island for 25 years. I'm kind of a data-driven type of person. I'd like to see the city council make their decisions based on data as opposed to some of the things that I think reasons they make their decisions. So today in the email, you got an email with some information that I'm going to reflect on here today. So hopefully you had a chance to read it. But a few facts about the taxes. So over the past 6.5 years, the property taxes have increased on average of 3.03% year over year, and not the 1% we hear about, because the property taxes include new building and new construction. At the same time, the inflation rate, as measured by the CPIW, Seattle and Bellevue, has averaged 2.5% year over year over the same period of time. But spending in the general fund has averaged 3.2% year over year over the same period. That's a spending rate of 55% above the CPI rate. So being data-driven, my conclusion would be the city has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So do you agree with me? And if not, why?
Patrick, you could start with that one in a minute.
Yeah, this is really difficult. I was working all day, and then I had about 20 minutes to see my kids, and I focused on that rather than checking my email. So I apologize, I haven't seen this email. So it's really hard for me to comment on it, having no way of citing, seeing where those numbers came from, doing my own research. I too make data-driven decisions.
Just assume the numbers are correct.
I'm not going to make that assumption, though, because those numbers actually differ from everything that I've heard from people running the city. But regardless of that particular issue, for me, I don't focus on efficiency first being the way that a city should be run. I think that we should focus on effectiveness. I think we should focus on community. I think we should focus on the output that the city is providing. I think that we do need to trim costs where we can, clearly, but for me, that's not my number one priority. So, yeah, I mean, she has it printed out here, so it's really hard for me to kind of comment on this without seeing it right now. I apologize, I didn't see that email.
Okay, thanks. Well, full disclosure, Bob Harper and I were both on the CAG together, and Bob is a data-driven guy, and he does understand the finances really well. And I do agree with what he has to say. The 1% cap on property taxes is kind of a false statistic. It's true, but we get the new construction as well. And so year over year, the tax revenues do grow at approximately 3%, and that is more than the average rate of inflation. So I agree that we probably can trim spending and keep our budget fiscally sound. That's what I said at the beginning. And when I opened my remarks, I said I don't think we're in a crisis. I don't think we're at a fiscal cliff. We balanced the budget through the 2020 biennium, including funding all the things that the community thinks are precious, including school counselors. So let's not make any mistake about that. The issue really is, how are your city council people going to spend your tax dollars? Our general fund is $35 million a year. Our total budget is like $70 million a year. I mean, do you want somebody who is going to focus on efficiencies, or somebody who thinks that that's a second or third or fourth priority?
Thank you.
Mike Ciro, I just live a couple of homes down. I've been on the island for about 24 years. And again, I would like to reiterate, I appreciate you running. I know it takes a lot of time from both your professional life and your personal life. The question I have is primarily directed toward Patrick. At the last forum, at the League of Women Voters Forum, you made a comment about homelessness, not being a threat, homelessness folks not being a threat to the community. I looked on the internet, of course, and the 2016 Seattle one-night count identified only 45% that didn't have any drug use. 29% of the homelessness during the one-night count were involved with alcohol, 17% methamphetamines, 12% heroin, 6% crack, and others, i.e. marijuana, et cetera, about 20% of the homelessness that the one-night count identified. I differ with you that we can't be immune to it. I would like this community to be immune to homelessness. But we're not. I agree we're not. I was at the Clark Beach probably 3-4 months ago, and a homeless gentleman was sleeping in the middle of the parking lot there. Of course, I called the police, and they took action real fast. The question I have for you, Patrick, is that your statement at the forum made me think that you were naive about the risk involved with homelessness. I don't want to hear about it being a problem and this and that, and we need compassion. We all know about that. What I want to know is, how are you going to keep, what perspective will you attract policy or approach policy for the city so that we don't have a homelessness problem on the island, which, as you mentioned, is a regional thing. I'd like that regional issue just to keep on passing us up.
I know you directed that towards Patrick, but Lisa, you have the floor first.
I have to get to go first on this. So, yeah, I think we need to be worried about the homelessness issue spreading to Mercer Island, in part because we are so close to Seattle, in part because I think it does potentially pose a threat to our safety. It is well known that with homelessness is associated drug use and potentially other alcohol abuse. We have the risk of finding needles in our parks, which parents are reporting that they already do, and people are obviously not happy about that. We also don't have really the facilities here. We don't have any shelter beds. The Youth and Family Services does a good job of providing some bridge rent assistance to people who are in temporary financial distress, and they're able to do that. But we don't have shelter beds, and so I support participation in regional coalitions to help homelessness, assuming the funds are being wisely spent. I also support a strong law enforcement response with regard to camping or vagrancy, and I support the compassionate response of helping people who are struggling with homelessness or addiction or other problems to find a shelter bed, to find counseling, to get addiction assistance, and to finally kind of break that cycle, because camping in the park for the rest of your life is not a compassionate solution.
All right, thanks for the question. I think I think misrepresented there on my position at the League of Women Voters Forum. I definitely am concerned for safety. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. As I said, my wife runs in the park every day, so obviously safety is a concern for me. But I'm also data-driven, and the data actually shows that people experiencing homelessness are actually more likely to be the victim of a crime than the perpetrator of a crime. So while I do think that we need to take into account the perception of safety on the island, I don't necessarily see somebody sleeping in a tent as an automatic threat to our public safety. I talked with Chief Holmes about this just last week after my statement and after your remarks online about my statement, because I wanted to make sure of my position, and he informed me that there have been homeless people on Mercer Island for years. There are islanders who are in housing, who use intravenous drugs on a regular basis in and out of their home. So these issues on their own are not new to the island. And I really do. I really take it as a compassion first approach. I think I don't just see somebody as sleeping in a tent, they must not be from here. I think, what if they lived on the Mercer Island for 16 years and they lost their home? What if they were using that bridge assistance from YFS and it just wasn't enough and they lost their home and they didn't want to leave the island? What if they grew up on the island, they were in some hard times, they came back to the one place that they felt like they had a home and they had to do so in a tent? So,
Thanks, Patrick.
yeah, and there's also a law, Boise v. Martin, where it's not
Sorry,
illegal
Patrick, you've run over.
to be homeless.
Okay.
Victor Rishis. We've been on the island. My family's been on the island for nearly 50 years. We're also local business owners. I'm the lesser known owner of Island Books. It's great to hear that both of you have been involved with small businesses. And so I had a question for you. In the Mercer Island comp plan that was updated in 2016, there's a figure in there that is figure TC-2, retail use required adjacent to street frontages, which specifies where retail frontage is required. Island Books and other businesses south of the Jackson Shell seem to have been drawn out of the retail core. My question to you is, what is your reaction to that? What would you do if anything, specifically, if you were on city council with that redraw? And where do you suggest that those businesses relocate to?
Thank you. Patrick, you have the floor.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to fully solve our budget crisis by seeing an increase in sales tax revenue, but we can sure put a dent in it, so I want to make sure that the city is doing all they can to do that. We do need more housing near transit centers. That's part of the Growth Management Act. It's mandated, but I see no reason that zoning should be residential only. I think that the businesses or buildings are more effective, more efficient, and just better for the community overall when they have a community aspect to it. A lot of the issues, and when we first moved here, we lived at the Island Square Apartments just near QFC there, and they do have retail on the ground floor, which we really loved. But there wasn't a lot of community there. People come in on 3-month leases and short-term contracts, and I really want to establish some feeling of community in that town center, and I think that the way to do that is through our small businesses. So I would push back on any moves to rezone into residential only, and I would work hard to maintain that retail core because we need it.
Thank you for that question. I think the issue here is that area has already been pushed out of the retail core into residential only, and so the land, the property is much more valuable to be developed into multifamily than it would be to retain as retail. The charming little shops that are there right now would not be preserved in any redevelopment. So I don't know, I wasn't on council, I don't know why the lines were drawn that way, so as to push the southernmost businesses out of the retail business core. I think it's worth taking another look at. It's definitely retail business core. I mean, the post office is there, and the entire Rite Aid area is there, and all of the shops with Island Books are there. It seems like Mercerdale Park is a natural southern boundary for that, but it took a long time to get that redone. I don't know how much appetite the community or the council has for it, but I certainly think it would be valuable to really expand the opportunities for retail businesses to thrive on the island, as opposed to having them kind of artificially excluded by zoning decisions that don't really match the actual uses.
Hi, my name is Alan. I've lived on this island for 25 years. 23 of those years, I I've had the privilege of using the HOV lane when I was driving by myself in the car. The last 2 years, I've had to go via North Mercer Way or go down Gallagher Hill and hit the highway going westbound that way. I must confess that recently I've been using the HOV lane anyway because I noticed there's no damn place for a police car to stop me. Furthermore, if I decided that I would not break the law and go via North Mercer Way, I'm really afraid of what's going to happen when the buses start clogging up North Mercer Way. So we have a traffic problem currently and a worse traffic problem to come. I would like each of you to explain or say how you would work to solve both of those problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Al, for that question. Yes, I miss the SOV or the HOV lane as an SOV driver very, very, very much. But I think that may be gone for good since the center lane roadway is now covered with train tracks. So maybe that ship has sailed. I think the best way we can protect the traffic issues and the congestion is by doing what I'm doing, and that is pushing back on any quote-unquote improved or optimal configuration. Those were Sound Transit's characterizations of the bus intercept. The desired increases to volumes pushed by Sound Transit and Metro have the potential to paralyze North Mercer Way. We made a settlement agreement with them that, while probably not perfect, was good in 2017. It limited traffic volumes, it limited bus layovers, it limited idling time, and it limited pickups and drop-offs to the south side of North Mercer Way, thereby helping greatly with pedestrian safety issues and volumes. To the extent that regional entities, our regional partners, as we say, are trying to push solutions that optimize the configuration for their operations, but not for the City of Mercer Island's operations, not for residential access and freedom to get on and off the island. I mean, even just to get off the freeway at Island Crest Way and make it over to the Roanoke, for goodness sakes. We gotta preserve that. Push back.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm fortunate. I'm walking distance from the park and ride, and on days that I have to drive in, I commute with my 3-year-old because his childcare is a block away from my office. So I haven't felt those effects, but I do, I enjoyed the benefit of that while we had it, and do regret that it was taken away. But as I said before, environmental impact is always something that I'm going to consider, and we should be looking at ways to have carpools, to have people using that mass transit. And I know that that's not realistic for everybody. And I do see the problem with the bus intercept going where it's going to go, and the fact that we don't really have an easy way for the entire west side of the island to get onto the freeway without having to go right through that or right through the town center, which is going to be even worse for traffic. So I think that if we come to the table with Sound Transit in good faith, we can work with them to have them join us when we go petition the feds to be able to get on, at least get on to the freeway off that Island Crest, as the HOV lane on Island Crest there. Maybe make just that 1 mile stretch until you get to the bridge, maybe make that single access option there. So I think that there are ways to do this with working with some of our regional partners.
I answered this again. That's okay. I'll answer it again. This is our last question.
Sorry. Hi. Thank you both for running. Appreciate your giving back to the public. My name's Robin Russell, and I ran in the primary. It was an interesting experience. My question has to do with transparency. So it seems like every election time comes around, and all of a sudden the current council members who are running talk about how transparent they are, but then throughout their term, it doesn't appear that they're transparent. I don't I email them, I don't get responses to questions and those types of things. And so my question to both of you is, what will you do to make sure that you're listening to the constituents and that you are transparent? We have two big projects, the bus intercept and the community facility zone, and the residents were so far behind on knowing what was going on because there wasn't transparency. And so I just want to understand how you would make it so that all voices are heard by the City Council.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have found the city staff to be incredibly transparent and incredibly helpful when you have any questions like that. I think it's important to keep in mind that the city council is a volunteer position. Many people on the council are juggling full-time jobs, juggling family life, and yes, we're taking that upon ourselves, but we need to be realistic in terms of what we expect with response rate and things like that. I definitely am on board with that transparency. That's part of why I've taken it upon myself to knock on so many doors during this campaign, because I really do want to hear what the entire island has to say. I know that the issues on the south end of the island are far different than the issues on the north end of the island where I live. Issues near the JCC are different than the issues near the old Boys and Girls Club. So I value citizen input. I think that it would be nice to see council members having some sort of office hours or town hall meetings on a regular basis with 7 council members. I think if each one did one a month, I think, or one a month, and then the next month somebody else, next month somebody else. That's not a ton of time that we're asking of each individual council member, but it does a lot to provide that sense of transparency, and I'd be really excited to engage in those town hall style forums when I'm elected.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's really important for citizens to know where their elected officials stand. That's why I haven't been shy about telling you my position on issues. I try to explain in council session why I vote the way I do. I try to ask questions that illuminate both sides of the issue. I will continue to do that. It's probably not realistic to doorbell for your entire term in office, so you can't do that. I agree that town halls or office hours might be a good idea. I also agree, though, that we have to make the city council meetings less punitive for the public to attend. We have to tighten up the agendas and the schedules. We have to make them shorter. We have to make them more friendly for people to attend so they don't go until midnight, so that the public can legitimately participate in the public process without that. And that means we need to prioritize what we're going to do. We need to put out clear, timely notices telling people what to expect at the city council meetings, how to participate. There are some online tools. I think they could be better. We've got a lot of technology. I would like to see input in multiple ways. I read every single email that I get from every constituent. Often they're just seem to be straight input, not requiring a response. I do try to answer all of the ones that ask me specific questions or seem to demand a response. And that's what I would continue to do as your council member for the next 2 years.
Thanks, Lisa. We're now going to start to the closing arguments, or not closing statements, since we're not arguing, we're just talking. And that is, Lisa, you get to go first.
Okay, how much time do I have?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Wow, thank you all for being here. These were wonderful questions, really spanned the scope of all of the issues that we care about, from budget to housing to homelessness to local control to transit to traffic to, we actually didn't talk about the Tully's project. I'm surprised we didn't get any about that, but local zoning questions. These are all critically important issues facing the council. I have spent a year getting up to speed on these issues. I will hit the ground running for you. If you have any questions for me, my website is up. My cell phone number is on my card that's out there on the tables. Please take one. My positions on the parks are out there on the 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Please take one and read it. Call me, email me. I will respond to you. I've been proud to represent the community so far, and I would be honored to continue to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming tonight and for the really thoughtful questions. I thought that this was a great discussion that really showed that there are 2 distinct choices in this race in terms of experience and in terms of priorities and perspective. And I think that That's something really important to consider. I think that everybody can agree that we need to have efficiency in our government, but where do you prioritize that in terms of other things? I wanted to mention, since Lisa brought the parks questionnaire that was sent to everybody, there was also a sustainable Mercer Island questionnaire that was sent to all the candidates, and I'm proud of my responses to that. Lisa left a 2-sentence remark that she doesn't think that sustainability is something that should be addressed at the city level, that it's best handled at the state and federal level. So that's a clear difference in our priorities. I think that environmental impact is to be considered even above efficiency. If something is the green way to go and maybe it costs a little less, I think that that's the way to go, because what good is it when the planet is burning down if we saved 10% that year? It doesn't, those two things don't jive for me. So we do have very different backgrounds. I think that I bring a unique perspective that the council could benefit from. I'm the only candidate that has experience as a professional artist.